What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about Britain's deadliest disaster, which is an event called the North Sea Tsunami. To be completely honest, I have never heard of this before. I don't know what happened, I don't know when this happened, but this sounds pretty bad, like Britain's worst disaster ever. So I'm actually quite interested to learn about what exactly happened. It's the deadliest disaster, so maybe a lot of people lost their lives. I don't really know what happened, so I'm really quite interested. So let's take a look.
It's the deadliest natural disaster in British history. Roughly 8,000 years ago, a gigantic submarine landslide off the coast.
Wait, stop. Hold on, what? This was 8,000 years ago. Okay. I don't want to say that makes it better, but maybe it does. I thought this was like a recent natural disaster that killed tons of British people. Like somehow I didn't know about this, like in modern history. This is like 8,000 years ago. Okay, that is critical information. That's good to know. Okay.
In British history. Roughly 8,000 years ago, a gigantic submarine landslide off the coast of Scandinavia triggered a tsunami the likes of which Europe had never seen. In an instant, enough sediment...
What? Wait, what? This is not what I was expecting. What the heck is this? This was triggered off the coast of Scandinavia, a landslide that caused a tsunami. Oh my god, how freaking big was this tsunami?
Triggered a tsunami the likes of which Europe had never seen. In an instant, enough sediment collapsed to bury the whole of Scotland to a depth of 8 meters.
What?
So much water was displaced that it created a vast wave which came crashing into Britain at 80 miles per hour, reaching up to 40 meters high. The water...
What? I can't stop myself. It's just like, what? This is crazy. How do do they have records of this? How do they know this happened? This was 8,000 years ago. Maybe somebody back then wrote something down about the 400-meter tall tidal wave that almost, destroyed all of Britain? By the sound of it.
Water obliterated everything in its path. Rivers and estuaries were inundated. Entire coastal communities were just swept away.
Oh my God.
It's estimated that up to a quarter of Britain's Mesolithic population died, making it, per capita, the deadliest disaster in British history.
What? So that's the sad part about this. It's true. Like, a lot of human life was lost 8,000 years ago. That's still very, very sad. A quarter? Hold on. He said a quarter of the British population died from this tidal wave, from this tsunami. That is horrific sounding.
And yet Britain wasn't even the worst affected region. That honour would go to the now lost area that's been called Northern Europe's Atlantis, Doggerland. A lush, low-lying plain connecting Britain to the mainland, Doggerland was the closest the Mesolithic world had to an Eden. But
wait. Hold up. This is fascinating. I didn't know this video was going to be so fascinating. I thought it was just going to be kind of traumatic and sad, which it is. But it's also like, we're talking about pretty old history now. Doggerland? There was a place called Doggerland that was completely submerged by water due to this tsunami. There used to be like a bunch of land, like connecting the UK to the mainland, Europe? Is this correct? It looks that way based on these photos. What on earth? Yeah, there was a lot more land until islands and the area sunk underwater. Holy cow. It really is like a long forgotten Atlantis under there. Maybe.
Eden. But when the tsunami hit, it would become ground zero for a catastrophe beyond imagination.
Oh.
Join us today as we explore both the lost world of Doggerland and Britain's prehistoric apocalypse.
Oh my god. This is fascinating. What?
Picturing...
Hold up. Oh my god, this is like a mystery. This is really, really interesting. I am actually really, I'm enjoying this a little too much for how kind of sad it is that a huge tidal wave killed like a lot of people. That's sad, but we're gonna talk about the lost land, Doggerland, that's like underwater right now. That used to be part of like the UK by the look of it. And this crazy, as he put, the apocalypse basically happened.
Picture in your head a map of Northern Europe. You can probably conjure its most famous features with ease. Denmark poking out of the top of Germany, Scandinavia looking weirdly like some guy's leprosy-afflicted genitals, and of course Britain and Ireland floating apart from the rest, defiantly doing their own thing.
Yeah.
Got that? Well, now we're going to take that map and move it back in time, all the way back to the end of the last ice age.
Okay.
The Northern Europe you'd see back then would look completely different.
Really?
During the last ice age, Europe's sea level was a staggering 122 meters lower. Instead of a separate Britain and Ireland, you just had one gigantic clump of land attached to the rest of Europe by...
What? It's true. Doggerland. Do Brits learn about this? About the lost Doggerland? There was a huge amount of land that was like in between the rest of Europe and the UK, connecting it. What? Who knew? What the heck?
by a swath of desolate, scrub-filled tundra. This tundra was essentially uninhabited, until, that is, the world began warming. As the ice sheet slowly retreated, prehistoric humans pushed north following the wild animals. To their presumed surprise, they soon found themselves in an ancient paradise. Where the tundra had once stood, now lay a vast, low plain teeming with life. In this warming world, one slightly warmer than today, there would have been forests, lakes, valleys.
What? This is so weird. Like, this sounds made up. This sounds like a story or something, a fantasy book. This is real. Like, there used to be this long-lost, lush, amazing paradise that was attached to Britain. What?
Lagoons, meadows, estuaries. Wild berries grew in abundance alongside hazelnuts and other foods that were perfect for foraging. Animals grazed along the shorelines while the waters teemed with fish.
Why do they have to make it sound so perfect? We really lost something here.
Today we call this lost world Doggerland, but for Mesolithic Europeans, it probably had a different name. For around 100,000 ancient humans, it was simply known as home. Not that the migration stopped at Doggerland. Just as the plain became home to scattered settlements, so too did the island of Britain. Of course, it wasn't actually an island then, even as the melting ice sheet slowly revealed its modern contours.
Britain wasn't an island. Britain was not an island a long time ago. I did not know that. Wow.
Thousands more years, Britain would be attached to Europe via Doggerland, no more separate than Italy is today. But whether the migrants settled on the plain or in Britain itself, one thing is certain. For these hunter-gatherers, it would have been a time of plenty. Compared to our mental images of the Stone Age as a time when dudes lived in caves and hit each other on the head with clubs, life in this ancient lands would have been surprisingly sophisticated. People likely lived in semi-permanent camps of perhaps 10 to a few dozen people, keeping to the shore.
This is really sad, actually. It's getting sad again. Because he's making it sound like it was a really, like, you know, for the time, pretty technologically savvy and prosperous. But this is, I know the end of the story here is that this is the area that's going to get smashed into by a giant killer tsunami wave, right?
Shores and estuaries in the fall and winter, and heading inland to hunt during the summer. These camps would be moved and rebuilt as needed, allowing for a near-nomadic lifestyle. But nomadic doesn't mean unadvanced. We have evidence of boat building, tool making, and even the construction of ancient wooden slipways. And this last one is important, as it suggests Mesolithic Britons and Doggerlanders spent more time cooperating than they did fighting over who had the best loincloth. Evidence has even been uncovered of annual social events when all the region's tribes would gather, often on low cliffs.
Oh yeah, okay. That kind of clears this up for me. I was thinking earlier, how do they have a recorded history of all of this? And it's like, apparently at the time, I don't know my history very well. 8,000 years ago, they were making pictures or hieroglyphics and recording this stuff down in some way. And that's how they have this proof of Doggerland and that society, as well as this tsunami, I'm guessing.
Overlooking sealing grounds. Aside from an excuse to hold the Stone Age equivalent of Glastonbury Festival, these gatherings would have also allowed the young to find mates. They would have likely been storytelling too. With no written language, these bygone cultures would have had oral traditions telling a whole cycle of now lost stories about their forgotten gods. In short, this was a vibrant world with complex societies interacting over hundreds of kilometers. Sadly, it would be these humans that bore the brunt of the coming disaster.
Okay. We're finally kind of getting to it now. Man, I didn't know this was going to be like a history lesson, but I'm enjoying it. Doggerland. Great place. Wonderful place, apparently. Worked very well with the rest of Britain. And now the impending doom is coming. Before the wave. Okay.
Even before the tsunami struck, there were signs that this whole warming world thing was changing Doggerland's fortunes. A few millennia before, most of the northern hemisphere had been buried under ice, including Canada and America. Now, as that ice thawed, those places were experiencing dramatic changes. Over in the modern US, so much meltwater came off the glaciers that it formed a gigantic lake known as Lake Agassiz. In fact, the word gigantic doesn't really do it justice. Lake Agassiz was bigger than all of today's Great Lakes combined, closer in size to the Black Sea.
That's so interesting. So the reason this is all happening right now is it's the end of the Ice Age. And that's causing weird stuff to happen. Lakes are forming, some of which don't exist today, but did then, that were the size of the Black Sea. Here in the United States, actually, I didn't know that. And it's probably going to be the climate changing is going to be the cause of this tsunami, huh?
Than Lake Superior. When it finally burst its banks, the whole world knew about it. Around 6,200 BC, Lake Agassiz sent all of its water flooding out into the North Atlantic. Over in ancient Europe, this sudden influx of water caused the sea level to noticeably rise. And with that rise came some dramatic changes. See, Lake Agassiz disrupted the Atlantic circulation of warm water, causing temperatures to drop. For Doggerland, that meant a 1-2 punch of vanishing coastline and sudden cold winds pummeling its shores.
Oh, so Doggerland was already having a very rough time. Like, this lake emptied into the ocean, it changed the, symbiosis of the ocean and raised temperatures, and Doggerland was already losing ground to rising sea levels, and now it's the climate's changing and, not everything is adapting.
The result was a land no longer such a paradise, one where fertile land was replaced by marshes and jagged coastline. As Doggerland shrank, so too did Britain's physical connection to mainland Europe. Within maybe a century, all that remained was a narrow land bridge and a scattering of low-lying, swampy islands.
That's so fascinating. Imagine being alive at that time and just watching the connection between Great Britain and the rest of Europe just vanish before your eyes. Britain was becoming an island, in real time. Yeah, it probably took a while, but still. And Doggerland is just having a slow, painful death by the sound of it.
Yet this wasn't the end of the region. While the changes were bad for some, it allowed others to thrive, those who transitioned to a life ever more based around fishing and boat building. For some, the changes were probably beneficial. Sadly, rising sea levels weren't the only changes the retreating glaciers were producing. Off the coasts of modern Norway, shifts were underway that would soon spell doom for Mesolithic Britain. Far beneath the seabed, huge chambers of long-frozen methane were beginning to thaw. This methane had been frozen solid during the Ice Age, but the warming world turned it back into a gas. Since it was still trapped underground, this transformation was hugely destabilizing for Norway's continental shelf. Unfortunately, even as things grew less stable underground, they became shaky above ground too. As the glaciers, once covering Scandinavia, retreated, they'd taken untold cubic kilometers of ice with them. Since
What? That nature is scary. He's saying there's methane or methane under the ground, turned back into gas because of rising temperatures. Is he saying that parts of the Norwegian coast are going to explode? Or just become unstable because of all this underground gas? And the melting ice shelves are all making this perfect storm, literally, to create a perfect storm or tsunami that's going to destroy Doggerland. You can't make this up. This is like a drama series before my eyes.
size is really, really heavy, this meant the ground above Norway was suddenly no longer being pressed down on, just as gas started bubbling up like crazy below it. Today, scientists believe this combination led to major earthquakes. And at some point in 6200 BC, the biggest earthquake yet struck. The Storegga slide remains the third biggest known submarine slide in history.
Wow.
Over just a few hours, nearly 300 kilometers of continental shelf collapsed, displacing 3,000 cubic kilometers of debris. Had a slip...
Oh my, it's like too big to even imagine that this actually happened. It's terrifying. And, man, so why did this go from like Norway kind of what, like west then south? Down into Doggerland. How unfortunate. That's how it kind of, the direction it took.
This size somehow happened on land, it would have been enough to bury the whole of Scotland. Underwater, though, it instead displaced an unimaginable amount of seawater.
Yeah.
As we saw with the Indian Ocean in 2004 and Japan in 2011, such displaced seawater doesn't just make a bit of a splash and then resettle on the surface.
Yeah.
It creates a wave, a rushing, powerful, overwhelming wall of water that radiates out in all directions, sweeping across the oceans until it finally crashes up against land.
That is absolutely terrifying. That is absolutely insane. I had no idea stuff like this happened. Thousands of years ago. You're just living your life, and the planet decides that it's time to destroy you, basically. Oh my god.
In tsunami-prone cultures like Japan, these waves happen often enough that the natives try to prepare for them, even in ancient times. But Europe isn't a place regularly exposed to tsunamis. At the moment the Storegga slide sent its annihilating wave shooting out across the water, it's unlikely anyone in Britain or Doggerland had any idea that the sea was capable of such a thing.
No.
If that's the case,
No.
they were in for a rude awakening.
Yeah.
Although no one could have known it at the time, Britain was about to experience the deadliest day in its entire history.
Wow. Wow. So it's true. This tsunami, this series of events that led to this tsunami coming off Norway became the deadliest day for Britain ever. That's how it happened. Man, and oh my god, that's just so terrifying thinking of, oh my god, thinking of being there in a way, if you can put yourself there, and you're just like living, and this giant tidal wave just comes and it destroys your home and everything, basically. It's hard to even imagine. It sounds not real in a way, like a movie or something, but this really happened to lots of people thousands of years ago. Okay, the flood. Okay, so the tsunami, I mean, when the tsunami landed, I assume the wave destroyed a bunch of stuff, and then there's the flooding that just anything else that wasn't destroyed is flooded and destroyed and useless, basically.
The key thing that made the North Sea tsunami so deadly is the time of year it occurred. Thanks to ancient fruit stones discovered in the layers of sediment it left behind, we know the tsunami must have landed in autumn. The most likely estimate is around late October. This was a problem because autumn was when Mesolithic peoples returned from their summers hunting on higher ground to settle in beside the coast for winter. Although Britain's population is thought to have been a mere 50,000 at this time, nearly all of them were concentrated in coastal areas, most of which were on the east coast.
No! Because so unlucky. So unlucky to have a tidal wave come and destroy your life. But also, it's the time of year when the most of the population there is on the coast, too. Of all places.
AKA exactly where a giant killer wave was about to hit. In Doggerlands, it was even worse. Nearly entirely low-lying Doggerlands was like the Netherlands without its seawalls.
Yeah, I'm looking at this map, and it's like, so this wave must have come off, like, southern Norway to Doggerland in order to be pointed at Doggerland, I guess?
Flood defenses, or excellent cheese. A flat space, a spilled pint of beer could probably inundate. This meant most of its inhabitants stood a roughly zero chance of surviving what came next. Obviously, since there were no written records at this time, we don't know exactly what the catastrophe looked like, but we can guess. If it
Okay.
occurred in the daytime, there were likely primitive boats just offshore, fires burning outside Stone Age tents. Maybe people were working, maybe they were playing or eating, or in the middle of some ritual. Maybe neighbors were simply sat together gossiping while they kept one eye on their children. Whatever the truth, there's no ambiguity about what came next.
Oh my, the way he describes it is exactly right. You're just like doing your thing thousands of years ago, and out of nowhere, it wouldn't be out of nowhere, right? You'd see it in the distance, like a 400-meter tall wave. But then what do you even do at that point? Like, how do you get away from that?
Up in the Shetland Islands off Scotland's northern tip, these Mesolithic hunter-gatherers would have all fallen silent, stopped what they were doing, as the sea mysteriously vanished. In an instant, the waters would have retreated, pulling far, far back, exposing shore that likely hadn't seen daylight since Lake Agassiz came pouring into the Atlantic.
Wow.
Today, most of us know that this is nature's way of telling you to run like hell. But no one in Mesolithic Britain could have known this. They likely just watched, puzzled, maybe scared as the sea did something they'd never seen it do before. Somewhere between a few seconds and a few minutes later, the horror began.
Oh my god, and this is absolutely terrifying how he describes this. So the warning sign is that the sea retreats, it retracts away from you, like it's getting sucked down, I guess, because the water is like, I don't know, a wave. Maybe it displaces the water on the bottom to come up over the top. But maybe that's the warning sign of a wave. I didn't know that, is that water gets pulled away. And everyone on these islands and Doggerland are just like, what's going on here? Like, what is this? Only for it, that's the warning sign that they don't know, but that's the warning sign that the wave is coming. We are exactly halfway through this video. This is a pretty long video, but this is extraordinary and very interesting to me. But I think I'm going to stop here for now on the cliffhanger and continue the rest of this. There's still half of this left. I'm going to finish this up in part 2. So if you've enjoyed this so far, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on Britain's deadliest disaster so far. And if you're interested in part 2 of this, or just more videos like this in general, me reacting to Britain and British culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.